thank everyone for coming today. Committee members, Board of Trustees, Mr. Santos, and district staff, welcome everyone. The time is 6:09 on this, the 12th day of June 2013, and I call the Citizens Bond Committee meeting to order. Mrs. Bruni, could you please call the roll of the steering committee?
Richard Morales, Chair. Sylvia Bruni, Patty Saniguel, Joey Leon, Laura Montemayor, Chico Redondo, and Lalo Medina. Present.
Thank you, Mrs. Bruni. I'll ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I would ask everyone to say the Texas Pledge as well. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible. Thank you. Let the record show that a quorum of board members of United Independent School District is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. So we'll move on to agenda item number 2 at this time. And we will have opening comments by all the committee members that or committee members who choose to do so. Persons who are committee members who are wishing to comment publicly may do so during this part of the agenda of today's meeting. And we will designate 2 public comment meetings at the beginning and at the end of each meeting. We will ask that comments be limited to the current committee agenda items. We have some rules governing the presentations. We ask that no presentation shall exceed 3 persons per side of an issue, nor shall the time per subject exceed 10 minutes. Each person will be allowed to speak for no more than 3 minutes. Any delegations of more than 3 persons shall appoint 1 person to present their views before the committee. For those of you that are not committee members, please be advised that the Board of Trustees will have a standing agenda from now until November at their regular board meetings, at which time they will take any public comments on the proposed bond from any citizens. So we ask that comments today be limited just to the committee members that are here. All right, at this time, do we have anyone from the committee that wants to make a public comment? All right. So at this time, we'll move on to our next agenda item, as we've listed it, which will first be agenda item number 3, which is a presentation or discussion to be discussed by Superintendent of Schools Roberto Santos and district staff. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Gilbert, the chairman of the board.
Good evening. I wanted to thank everybody for coming to help us with this project. It's one of the most important projects that the community can undertake. I'd like to begin by thanking our steering committee, and I'd like to also recognize a former board member, Bill Johnson, who's here to join us in this effort. I've seen him utilize a lot of wisdom over the years. I got to overlap with him a couple of years there on the board, and we really appreciate you being here. I'd also like to recognize some board members that we have with us. They would stand up somewhere in here. Ramiro Bevis. Yeah, Ramiro, one of our board members. Roberto Ramirez in the back. Javier Montemayor. And in case I missed anybody walking in, do we have any other board members here today? No. Okay, very good. I'd also like to offer you a little bit of a explanation as to how we're set up going into this thing. We very specifically wanted to have this committee steered by a group of members of the community that were not on the school board. We'd like to have a little bit more of a role participating like the general committee. So you'll see us involved much the same as yourselves. We will also help the staff out with some of the presentations. Our big goals for this arrangement are that we would like to make sure that we hear really well what the community has to say to us. We are going out for a bond. It's inevitable that we must do that. We figured that out. But how we do that could be a lot of different ways. There's a lot of input that we need from the community to make sure that what we hold out to the community is well received. And we hope you all can help us. So every effort will be made here by the staff and by the board members to hear you as best we can. And the second part of the effort that we would like from the committee members is after we do this, we hope that you come away from the experience with a positive feel for what we're trying to do and can assist us in communicating to the public what went on here and what we're trying to do. And it's most important that we get the folks out that are going to be concerned about this issue. And there's a lot of different points that are going to be made here tonight, so I don't want to get into those. We have a variety of different kinds of presentations to get at the particulars. But I would like to make one point myself before I sit, and that is that in my line of work, I work with a lot of public sector facilities, public sector interests. I'm a civil engineer. A lot of the projects that I work on are developed to be utilized by the public. And one thing that I've noticed about being involved with the school district that really strikes me is there isn't any other public endeavor that matters more to our community than that. The water doesn't matter as much, the sewer doesn't matter as much, the streets don't matter. There's many things that are served to our community that we won't notice as much as we will quality of education that our kids receive. And most of you, if not all of you, have a lot of feel for that. We recognize that. The way that we've solicited membership for this committee was to look out for people that will know what we're getting at here. It can easily be overlooked by the rest of the community. People are busy, we're all busy, and people go on about their daily business and maybe don't notice. But that's the one big thing that I hope we take from this. There's a lot of specifics, but in general, there isn't anything more important that can be provided as a public service than the education of our children. So please keep that in mind as you're watching all of this. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. Everybody knows him, but introducing our superintendent, Mr. Santos, Roberto J. Santos. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joe. I also want to welcome the committee, and I know that we had a lot of input from principals, staff, so I think we felt that we had a very good cross-section of the committee. I think all of us, going back to what Mr. Gilman said, I think there's nothing more important at UISD than the 43,000 students that we service today. You know, every day that we come to school, and we're going to show you a little video of where United has been. Some of us have been here for a long, long time when we were small, to where we're at now. And sometimes you don't have an opportunity to go to our schools when the students are there. If you don't have any children, sometimes you might drop them and you take off, but if you see, you know, how packed these campuses are, and what the need of this district is, not only now, but I think in the next 4 or 5 years, I think that's key and that's important for us. And I think Mr. Gilman is correct. You know, what we need from this particular committee is your input, your honest input. What is it that we need not only now, but the next 4 or 5 years in United? You know, as you know, the last bond election that we had in 06 did do well. We managed, I think, from the last bond election of 03, which passed, to now we've grown over 10,000 students. And our projection, and I know Mr. Gatson will share that with you, we're going to continue to grow another 4,000 or 5,000 students. So it's key that we look at all things that are presented. Any ideas that y'all have, you need to share it with us. Now, before we start our presentation, just a little housekeeping. As you come out this door, right there to your left, it's the ladies' bathroom. If you go down the hall, right before you get to the exit door, the south exit door, there's the men's bathroom on the back. And here, you know, again, there's some food there, water. If you need to move around, hey, feel free. It's committee. It's a group of people that are here, again, to get input. We need your input on these items. Before we start any of the presentation, I'd like to just show you, I think it's a 5-minute video that really tells you where United was, where we're at today. I think it's important that we see what we do.
United ISD, meeting the demands of a growing district. its doors to 340 first through ninth grade students. It wasn't until 1965 when United graduated its first class of 18 students. 52 years later, the class of 2013 can boast over 2,700 graduates. In fact, the district's high school enrollment has grown by about 11% over the last 3 years. In the past decade, United ISD has seen 10,000 new students enroll, and it's anticipated that over the next 5 years, the district will need to make room for an additional 4,000 students. United ISD is one of the fastest growing districts in the state. It's ranked as the second largest district in Region 1 and the 25th largest school district in Texas. With 41 campuses and nearly 43,000 students, keeping up with the growth has been a challenge for UISD despite its dedicated teachers and staff, as well as a school board committed to meeting the educational needs of all its students. Growing pains are nothing new to UISD, and in an effort to alleviate congested campuses, the district continues purchasing portable buildings for many of its schools. United ISD has 326 auxiliary classrooms, which is equivalent to 9 elementary schools. This equates to about 20% of the district student population currently attending classes in portable buildings. These portables were intended to be used as a temporary solution, but for many campuses, they've become permanent fixtures. However, the problem of exceeding student capacity in many of the school's common areas, such as the cafeterias, libraries, hallways, and gymnasiums, has not been so easy to deal with. In an effort to cope with the extraordinary growth, the district continues to be proactive in addressing student needs by implementing creative solutions that promote a safe and orderly academic environment. Some campuses have resorted to extended passing periods in order to safely accommodate students in the hallways. And many crowded schools have added additional lunch periods, making it necessary for some students to eat lunch as early as 10 a.m. United ISD also had to change school boundaries and establish enrollment caps in order to deal with a rapidly growing student population of about 1,000 new students every year. The various United ISD support services departments are also struggling to keep up with the increase in demand. Each day, the food services department serves over 50,000 meals to hungry students throughout the district. And by the end of this school year, it's estimated that 10 million meals will have been served district-wide. The United ISD growth has resulted in the transportation department expanding from just 4 buses in 1961 to the current bus fleet, which numbers 291 school buses and 226 drivers. UISD bus drivers transport 14,000 students to and from school every day. This amounts to over 17,000 miles traveled per day. United ISD covers most of Webb County. The district is 2,442 square miles, which is larger than the state of Delaware. So it's no wonder that UISD buses travel over 2 million miles per year, making it one of the most extensively traveled school districts in Texas. As the largest employer in Webb County, United ISD must keep pace in hiring employees to keep up with the growing student demands. The district has over 6,000 employees, with more than 2,500 of those being teachers. As the Gateway City continues to grow, so does United ISD. 96% of the home building permits issued are for homes being built in UISD. United ISD has truly become the destination district. It's the place where people want to live, work, open businesses, and send their children to school. However, with growth comes challenges that are in need of solutions. And the United ISD administration and board of trustees vow to uphold its commitment and tradition of continuing to give students a first-class education in a safe and academically nurturing environment.
Okay, that really gives you an idea of really why we're here today. You know, you see where we were and where we're at now, and what we know is going to be the future of United. And as we continue to grow, we will need your support. I think our students need your support. And at the end of this process, and we've got about 6 meetings that we've got set up, and really want to be as efficient with your time. Your time is extremely valuable. Be as efficient, but at the same time, be able to give you a lot of data, but at the same time, get data from you. We're also in the process of developing a web page. All these meetings are videotaped. We'll also put them on the web page. We'll also give you the opportunity for all the comments, any questions that you have. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question, either in the middle of the meeting, we have a little break, or at the end of the meeting, staff will be here to answer any questions. Same thing, if you want to write a question, leave it at the back desk. We'll go ahead and respond to the questions, and we'll send it to everybody on the email group. The whole idea is to keep you informed, be as transparent as we can, and really get you support. With that, I want to go ahead and pass it, let me just share with you on the binder that you have there. And let me get my binder up. You have a tab there that will say June 12. In that binder, you have all the data, the full information data, the whole reports. And what we gave you loose is really a synopsis of what we're going to present today. But you can look at the full data, full report on the backup data that we have there. The other item, at the end of the day, the binders are yours. You take it home, look at them, and also we'll give you our email address. If you have any questions, you can ask us any questions and we'll respond. When we have the next meeting, bring your binders here. If you want to leave your name tags and your name plates with us, we can save them for you, or you can just take it with you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and open that to Mr. Gatson, Mike. I'm sorry, Mr. Cruz. Mark Cruz is going to address.
I'm just going to go ahead. My name is Juan Cruz for the record, and I'm the General Counsel for UISD. I'm going to give you a synopsis of what the committee's function, your role and responsibilities are, their role, the steering committee, and how this is kind of going to work towards the latter part in August, at which time the board will have to make a decision as to whether or not to call for a bond election. The first word that you'll see on your slide up here that they'll show right now is all of you, including the steering committee members and the board members, are volunteers, and you're all here to hopefully serve the school district. A purpose, and that is to come up with some options and recommendations after you've heard the information that's going to be presented over the course of the summer. The president of the board, Mr. Gilpin, has appointed a chairperson of the steering committee. This is Richard Morales, who's an attorney, local attorney, and specializing in oil and gas. And we also have, he has appointed a vice chairperson, who is Sylvia Bruni, the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center. There's going to be 5 subcommittees that each one of you will have and to participate in. You will choose that which will be of most interest to you. There's going to be a committee of new construction, additions and renovations, finance, technology, security. These 5 committees are going to be chaired by one of the steering committee members, and Sylvia and Richard will kind of be able to be ad hoc members of each one of these 5 committees. As we go on to the next slide, the staff and the board trustees, which is what today is about, they're going to give you some information. That information is going to be gathered through the course of the summer with your committees and go over and see what is relevant, what do you think should the school district be headed in, what kind of direction. Your input will be facilitated through the chair people, and then it will be given to the steering committee. The steering committee will then make a final recommendation to the school board of trustees, and by the latter part in August, that's the statutory deadline that the board has to basically call for a bond election. If a bond election is called, it will be held in the first Tuesday or the first in November, in the early part of November. Going on to the next slide, agendas and public comments. The agendas are going to be put together by Mr. Santos and his staff, and then if some of you may want some agenda items also, you can request that as well. The chairperson will meet with Mr. Santos to make sure that those agenda items are in fact part of the agenda. If there is any type of comment, I think this has already been addressed, but this is a meeting for the committee members, and we want any committee member to feel free to either have a comment at the beginning or at the end of these meetings. And you can just step up to the podium and address, just state what your name is and what agenda item you want to address. Anybody else that's not a committee member that is in attendance at these meetings, then you can certainly have comment about the bond and how you feel about it at the regular board meeting, which is held every third Wednesday of the month. No presentation, just because of time efficiency, and certainly all volunteers will exceed no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 3 persons should speak on any side of an issue. Moving on to the next slide, maintaining order. We're going to run these meetings like we do the regular meetings, which is through the Robert's Rules of Order. Nothing that you have to learn, something that we will guide the chairperson of your committee. If during the course of the meetings, especially your committee meetings, there's going to be some decisions that have to be made, you will take, and it's going to be very simple, the majority rules. If there's 10 people in a committee and 6 people vote in favor of moving in a certain direction, that will govern that particular item. And then we also have some items there for disruption. We don't expect that, but certainly if there's any disruptive conduct like we have at regular meetings, then disruptive conduct will not be tolerated. The chairperson will give one warning, and then thereafter, we will excuse that person from the meeting. But we certainly don't expect for that. But anyway, that's in a nutshell. You have a much more detailed presentation there about the whole aspect of this committee, how it's going to work. But this is kind of a synopsis of that, of your roles and responsibilities. I'm going to turn over this part of the presentation now to Mike Doxa, who is one of the executive directors for UISD, to fill you in on kind of moving forward with the bond.
Good evening. Now that we went over the housekeeping items, we're going to go ahead and dive into the nuts and bolts of why we're here tonight. Where we're just providing just a very brief items of what we're talking about in terms of growth, but as the meetings move on and the next meeting and so forth and so on, we'll get into exact details by sectors and areas and so forth and campuses. But we wanted to share some items with you that maybe some of you may not be aware of. I know several presentations that we've done, and it has been an eye-opener for a lot of the people that we've been able to present before the groups. Just bear with us a little bit. You're going to be seeing a lot of our faces, and a lot of the information will be repetitive. I know some members of the committee have seen it. Nobody wants to hear me. Okay, that's better. I know some members of the committee have already seen this information. I know our staff has definitely seen a lot of the data itself, and they put this together. Real quick, at the end of the presentation, we'll have a break. And as Mr. Santos mentioned, we want to make sure that we encourage anybody that has any questions to come up to any one of our staff members, especially the lead members that are really working real hard on this bond election. If I can go ahead and introduce some of those members real quick so that you can seek them out at the break. We have Mr. Eduardo Zuniga, our Associate Superintendent for Business and Finance and Support Services. We have Ms. Laila Benavides, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance County. We also have Mr. Enrique Rangel. Okay, Cesar Trevino, right there in the back with our facilities department, and of course myself. Gloria Rendon, Assistant Superintendent for Administration, is there, raising her hand. So just seek any one of us out, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions. As Mr. Santos mentioned before, we'll write them down. We'll make sure to answer it for all the committee members to be able to know what was asked and so forth. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with that. This is just a real quick, again, in your packets, you have all the information. The actual loose packets that you have is the actual presentation that we're giving to you today. Inside your actual binders is more detailed information that we're presenting tonight, but if you want to follow along specifically in the presentation, it's the loose information that you have there. In 2009, 2010, we had an enrollment growth of about 40,906 students, which was 802 individuals that we increased in our school population, which was about a 2% increase. This year, in 2012, 2013, we had a peak enrollment of 42,921. Putting that into perspective, as it was presented in the actual presentation, we're the second largest school system in Region 1, which is basically all of South Texas and South Brownsville. We're the 25th largest school system in the state, and we're the 113th largest school system in the country. Again, putting that in perspective. Also, some real quick facts. United High School, at almost 4,000 student enrollment, is larger. There's 1,000 school districts in the state of Texas. United High School alone is larger than 67% of the school districts in the state of Texas. And our largest elementary school, which is Zamperini, right here next door to us, is larger than 53% of the school districts in the state. Just that one school is larger than the school systems for 53% in the state of Texas. As you can see, in years 2017, 2018, we project a growth of about 1,125 students. This gives you a little bit of a graph of what where we've been, where we anticipate where we're going to end up at. As you can see here, we had our peak enrollment at 42,921. We project our enrollment to be 43,321 next year, and we project in the next 5 years that we'll have an enrollment growth of about 4,000 students. This is a very telling slide here. If you look, we got this straight from the Census Department, and as we get into more meetings, and we'll get into more detailed information, but in the year 2000, we had a UISD, just the UISD portion of the city of Laredo, which is practically all of Webb County. We had 97,049 population. 10 years later, we grew 59,000, which was a 61.5% growth just in the UISD school boundaries. The planning department works very closely with the city of Laredo, with their planning department, and looking at particular permits and housing items that come forward. As you can see here, in 2007, we have data as far back as 2007. We had to break it down into two sectors, south and north. There's a lot of information that we have here. As you can see, the total south in 2007 was 525 actual permits that were issued in 2007. As you can see, the economy obviously took an effect where we went from 525 to 307, down to 250, and in 2010 we had the lowest number of permits during that period of time, which was 132. As you can see now, in 2012, we actually increased that amount to 238 permits last year, so there was a slight increase from the previous years. This is the north side area schools. And so as you can see there, 471 permits were issued in 2007. And again, the low period was 2010, where we had 372 permits that were issued. And then you see an increase in 2012 of 442 permits. Just a little bit of some notes that we have here at the bottom. The grand total of the 680 permits that we have currently represents 68% of the total construction from 2007, and an estimated increase of 13% from last year. 2013, the multifamily permits we have was 5 single permits, 270. Estimated by the end of 2013, multifamily permits being at 20, and single-family homes permits at 810. We're going to see by the end of this year that we're going to be almost at the levels of 2007 in terms of housing permits. As I mentioned also in the presentation, 96% of all homes, multifamily or single-family homes, are constructed in the UYM school buildings. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where people want to live, people want to build, and to be quite frank with you, that's really only the space that's available in our city. If you take Wood County, it's one of the largest counties in the state of Texas. We have only been able to develop 5%. So the potential for UISD's growth is 95% potential growth for the future. We've only been able to take out 5% or carve out 5%. This gives you some information as far as our particular campuses. For example, Salinas enrollment as of the peak enrollment back in November 9th of 2012, we had 821 students. The main core building actually has about 37 classrooms, and the portable classrooms that we have at Salinas are 20 portable classrooms, which is equivalent to 10 actual portable facilities, portable buildings. We put them from highest number of portables to the lowest, and as you can see, almost the vast majority of all of our schools have at least one portable, or in some cases, multiple portable buildings. In the elementary level, we have 146 portable classrooms. The middle school level, United South Middle School has the largest number of portables. We have 24 actual portable classrooms, which is the equivalent of 12 facilities, 12 actual buildings. That doesn't count the restroom facilities that have to be part of that, and all the other infrastructure and construction that has to be added to that particular one. Salvo Garcia and Clark Middle, which are probably schools that have peaked as far as their enrollment capacity and availability in that area, have no portable buildings, but all the other middle schools do, and we anticipate additional growth. United, the high school levels, Alexander High School has the most portables of all the high schools. Even though United High School was constructed and opened up couple years ago, we anticipate by next year, not this August, but the following August, we will be adding a portable facility there at United High School, even though we have a 9th grade campus that carves out 1,000 freshmen from the main campus. But even with that, we anticipate a portable building at the new United High School campus by 2013, 2014. And then, of course, we have our other alternative campus, which is the STEP Academy, which is all portable buildings at that particular location. This is a slide that indicates the age of all of our campuses. As you can see here, Clark Elementary, as far as the elementary schools, was constructed in 1973, which is roughly about 40 years old. We have United Middle Schools being the oldest campus, district-wide, which was constructed in 1963, which many of you know that was the original high school campus, and then, of course, the 9th grade campus was the new high school, and then, of course, now we have the new campus off of International, but that's 50 years old. And then we have the high schools, the oldest campus being the 9th grade campus currently right now, which is 29 years old. United South High School being the second oldest at 24 years. As it was mentioned in the presentation, we have 326 portable classrooms. That's the equivalent of roughly 8,150 students at a 25-to-1 teacher-student ratio. In some cases it's more, in some cases it's less. That's the equivalent of 9 elementary schools that we're teaching our students in portable facilities that were always meant to be temporary portable facilities. 28 out of the 41 UIC schools are over their capacity. 39 out of the 41 UIC schools are at 91% of their capacity. All that's telling us is that within a few years, all of our campuses will be over capacity. In your packets, there's a pull-down of there's a map that shows all the property that UIC owns. We were very fortunate that we have over 400 plus acres of property that UIC currently owns. What does that mean? That means that as soon as a bond is passed, we're going to be basically shovel ready to be able to construct immediately as soon as that money is made available to us. In the past, we had been kind of behind the 8 ball in that whenever a bond was passed, we used some of those funds to go out and purchase property. That made it difficult for us because a lot of times the people out in the community knew we had money, so they kind of raised the prices of the land. Now we're ahead of the curve, and so we're pretty much set for the next 15 to 20 years in terms of property. So whenever we have any future bond elections, in addition to this one, we'll have property ready to go into those particular locations. That means that all the money that we have will be strictly for construction of new facilities. And then this is just a real quick slide. It's indications Again, working with the City of Laredo Planning Department, that gives you an idea of where all the growth is going to be occurring. These are all the master plans that are recorded in the City of Laredo that give you an idea of the potential growth in terms of here in the near future where homes are going to be constructed. In some cases, there's over 1,000 or 2,000 particular lots in certain particular areas. Obviously, all that depends on cost and economy and so forth and so on, but we have to be able to plan ahead and be prepared for where that growth is going to be coming. Most of the information that we're going to be providing you is going to be not only to worry about overcrowding situation right now, but also to help in those future areas of growth that we see as potential in the future. The maps are in the loose portion. And then real quick, I think this kind of sums it up. It was a really neat photograph that I saw on the paper. It kind of showed a little bit of what the situation is. This was in June 2nd, Sunday paper there in the opinion view, and I think that actually in a nutshell wraps up what the situation is at that. It is a critical time in our school system. We did have a bond election that wasn't successful. The last successful bond election was in 2003, and we grew 10,000 students from that. So to be quite frank with you, we're at a critical crossroads to be able to get this thing done and to be able to make sure that we have kids in campuses in a safe environment. And with that, we'll go ahead and have a 10-minute break, leave right now, and then we'll have a presentation on the actual survey that was conducted and commissioned by the Board of Trustees. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, you can seek out one of the staff members here, or the superintendent.
Time is 6:46, and we're recess. We'll be back in 10 minutes. We're back from recess. It's 7 o'clock, and I will ask Mr. Santos to take the floor.
Okay, we're back from recess. Several months ago, the Board of Trustees, working together with the UISD administration, commissioned a private firm. We solicited and commissioned a private firm to be able to do a survey for a district. And what we wanted to do, the ultimate goal there, and we did not publicize it on purpose, so that people wouldn't have a preconceived opinion on the actual survey. We wanted to get as honest an opinion that we could get. Through that process, we were able to commission Ray Turkle and Associates, actually. And he'll go over all the details of the actual survey. It was a pretty thorough survey. Some of the numbers are pretty jaw-dropping in terms of the actual numbers of phone calls that were conducted in the actual survey results. But at the end of the day, we feel that we got a very honest opinion of our school district voters, of what they feel on certain aspects of potential bond election. And this is probably a really good guiding force for the entire committee, the administration, and the steering committee of what we need to be looking at for the future. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce Mr. Ray Turkle with Turkle Associates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. It's a great privilege to be here today. We were here about 6 weeks ago, meeting with the administrators and going over the results of the survey. Raymond Turkle and Associates is a public opinion research firm. We do a lot of work with school districts and with municipalities, assisting them in understanding voters and the opinions of voters. Because if you look at the main universe, you have a universe of everyone who is registered to vote. Then you need to drop down further because you have people who vote in generally presidential elections and in statewide elections. Then what you do is you have another group of voters who vote in local elections, elections that count most specifically for cities and for school districts. So we do a lot of work helping understand those realms. When Mr. Garza was talking about some of the schools here in the district being larger than some of the school districts in Texas, we've had the privilege of working with small school districts. We had several past bond elections that had failed previously, but were successful. We've also been privileged to work with some of the largest school districts in the state. We have helped the we've helped the Northside School District in San Antonio their last 4 to 5 bond elections, where they have passed over $3 billion. In fact, we're going to be starting another survey in July for their next bond election. So we're real excited about that. We've worked in Arlington, helping them. So we've done a lot of work, and we're real privileged and honored to be here with you, with the committee today, and talk about this survey. This was more than one survey. We actually did 2 surveys. We did a survey of historical voters in the district, but we also did an online survey of all district staff. And what's important about that is a lot of people will get information from staff. And so it's important to see how both groups compare. How people who don't necessarily have a lot of information view the district. And compare that with people who probably do have a lot of information. So the 2 surveys, we reported them separately. We didn't combine the percentages because we didn't want to skew one result or another. So what I'm going to do today is spend most of the time talking about the voter survey, but there are also some information relative to the employee results. And the other part is that we're going to focus most of this survey, or most of this presentation this evening, on questions that affect the bond election or a potential bond election. For example, we asked questions on overcrowding and offered some suggestions. We put in some questions on evaluating what parents thought of school issues and school initiatives. We're not going to address that information in this presentation, although I do believe in your packet is the entire presentation that I made the last time that I was here, which goes into great detail on both surveys. So with that, I'd like to first talk about the methodology of the surveys. We sampled 401 voting households with telephone numbers. Now, a survey with 400 respondents has an error rate of plus or minus 5% at a 95% confidence level. What does that mean? On a question where we might say, how strongly do you support or oppose something? We have an intense positive and an intense negative. And we have a general positive and a general negative. So if we take the 2 positives and add those 2 together, then I am 95% sure that it will either be 5% higher or 5% lower in what they call a worst case scenario. Now within the survey, we compared the results by subsector. In other words, we divided the results by high school attendance zone, so that what we could have was a true, valid sampling of the district. So in other words, if 20% were in a particular attendance zone, then 20% of the completed surveys were done there. So we didn't oversample one part of the district or undersample another part. The survey focused on households with voting history. We built a voter file. We incorporated history that we had. We incorporated the results, the people who voted in the 2007 bond election that failed, so that we could have an audience and a universe to contact. Most of the people who vote in bond elections generally do not have kids in school, have lived, are long-term residents, and are older individuals. The people that we generally find who are least likely to vote are parents of elementary level students. So those people who oftentimes stand to gain the most are the least likely to vote. And those people who don't have interaction with schools and only know what they hear from newspaper articles, which may well be positive, but are oftentimes are negative. They're the people who have the greatest tendency to vote. Now, we did find some things that are different about United than other school districts. But just going into that, just be aware that when we've conducted our surveys, the people that we most look at are people who really don't have kids in school. And one of the other things that we try to look at is people will say, well, let's bring people in to vote. It's really hard if somebody hasn't voted before that they're going to come in and vote on this type of an election. We need to look at people who have, again, shown that tendency to vote. So, we had to make 31,000 attempts in order to complete our 400 interviews. We did that over about a month's period. The average survey was 18 minutes, but we did have a couple people online. I believe the longest survey was 50 minutes, that we had somebody who would stay on the phone. But they were interested, and if you're interested, our interviewers are not going to say, I'm sorry, I've got to go to the next call, so you only get time. We're on there to get their opinions, and that's what we wanted to do. Now, for the employees, it was an online survey. We were in the field for about a week. We sent out email blasts to tell them what we were doing. For the most part, the surveys were identical. There was a couple of questions that were different. There was some information that was different. But in general, the surveys were the same. You'll note that we had a participation rate of 72% of all the employees in the district participated in the survey, either online, but for those employees who did not have email addresses, we had paper surveys distributed and collected and keep. So I was real pleased with the participation level that we got, and I think a lot of the information is very interesting. Let's talk about the profile. And this is the profile of the voters. 38% were under the age of 45. 37% were over the age of 55, and 17% were over 65, so we're seniors. 27% had lived in the district for under 10 years. 72% are long-term residents, with 41% saying they had lived here for over 20 years. Those are the people that are going to vote. One thing that we did find that was very interesting was that 50% said they had kids in UISD schools. So when we normally get a much smaller number, anywhere of 30%, we've got a 50% captive audience. And I think that's much better than we would have in normal school districts across the state. We had 27% said they'd had children graduate within the past 5 years, and only 27% said they did not have any kids in school. So again, we've got a good audience. We've got people who have a personal impact on it, and I was real pleased with that. Oops, went the wrong way. Sorry about that. One more. Okay. One of the first questions we asked of a survey in order to try to just get people to participate in it is to say, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the quality of public schools? And you'll note that when we looked at it, different school districts, different subsectors, or different attendance zones had different rates. In Alexandria, you'll see 18% were very satisfied. In LBJ, it was 21%. In United, it was 17%. United South was 22%. And among employees, it was 25%, who gave us the response that they were intensely satisfied. If you look at the combining of the two scores, in Alexander, we were at 67%, 84% in LBJ, 67% in United, 69% in United South, and 85% among district employees. So we had a very high satisfaction rate among the quality of schools at this particular point. Then what we did is we said, if an election is held today, how strongly would you support or oppose a bond election in the range of $307 million. And what we did is we said this $307 million would be used for new school construction, technology, safety and security, and at the time of the survey, also an amount of money, I believe it was $8 million, which would go into the construction of an indoor swimming facility if there was a partnership with the city and or the county. So what we tried to do is to give them the information, but not provide information. We call this a pretest. So without getting much information, just here it is, what would you do? And you note in the Alexander, we had 21% strong support compared to 33% in LBJ, 19% in United, 21% in United South, and among employees it was at 29%. If you take the 2 positive responses and compare them to the 2 negative responses, or the 1 negative response in this instance, in Alexander, it was 51 to 33. So we had majority support in Alexander. In LBJ, we had 79% to 7. They were extremely supportive. In United, we were at 60% to 31%, so about 2 to 1. In United South, we were at 69% to 27%. And then among employees, we were at 67% to 20. So without having been given any information, our initial outlook on a survey is very positive. Without giving them any information relative to overcrowding, relative to tax impact, relative to anything, voters were supportive of a bond election. Well, then what we did is we said, okay, let's look at some of the elements of a potential package. So what our intention in the course of the survey is to provide information, and then at the end of the survey to ask them the same question to see how the information impacted their decision. When we talked about enhanced computer technology and support for teachers and students, that captured more support than construction. And I think it's important to know, there's obviously, from the survey and from the information that was given, that there is an overcrowding issue and a new construction issue. But when you talk to the public, more important than new construction, just as a concept, as an element, is technology. Then we talked enhanced safety and security measures at school campuses at 90%. The asterisk is there because employees were supportive of that item at nearly the same rate. So within that 4% of what we did. Then replacing roofs and air conditioning units at older campuses, 87%. Building new schools and additions to alleviate the current overcrowding. It was at 84% of voters. It was at 90% among staff. So staff was more supportive of new schools and additions than voters were. Now it's hard to say that they were less supportive when you're at 85%. So you're better than 4 out of every 5 people. But when you have 7 items, you have to have something that's the top rated item, and you have to have something that's the lowest rated item. When you look at that, you look at from 93% to 84%, that's not a big difference. They're all very supportive of these items. The construction of an indoor swimming facility, again, but only if paid for through a partnership with the city or county, it was the least supportive item at 64%, so that's 2 out of 3. It was less supportive by employees than it was by voters, but we did want to look at it and touch base and see what we wanted to do. Then what we did is we talked about the overall support for various construction items. One high school in the Mines Road area was the item that captured the most support at 84%. 3 middle schools were just 1 percentage point less than that. The 4 elementary schools throughout the district, again, at 83%. The 9th grade centers were at 76%. So the least popular item was generated better than 3 out of 4 support among voters. Then what we did is we talked about district-wide needs, different than construction. Upgraded safety and security measures as a separate item generated 90% support. Technology enhancements and improvements throughout the district, 93%. A 93% at a plus or minus 5% means basically everyone. Replacing playground equipment at several elementary schools generated 82%, and purchasing new buses to replace older models at 79%. So as we talked to the voters were pro, they were advocated these items, they supported these items. Then what we did is we said, okay, let us give you some facts. And will these facts make you more likely or less likely to vote for an item? Because in an information campaign, what we have to do, or even in an advocacy campaign when the public committee, the campaigning starts, is we want to focus on items that the people are interested in addressing, that they're most concerned about. So what we want to do is we want to find out that type of information. In this particular one, classroom computer technology becomes outdated in 5 years. 79% said that that would make them likely to vote for a bond election. Enrollment is projected to grow by over 4,000 students in the next 5 years. 77%. Staff was at 82%. There are over 8,000 students housed in portable classrooms in the district, the equivalent of 9 elementary schools, generated 80% likely support. The district must continue to spend funds on older campuses to extend the life of the building and to protect taxpayer investment, at 76%. The least influential, in other words, if I were to come out to you and talk about a bond election, you would be least likely to support this one by my saying, well, the projected tax rate increase to pay off the 2003 bond election was substantially below projected tax rates. It did not generate as much interest. It did not generate as much knowledge. It was not something that people wanted to hear compared to statements on technology, to compare to statements on enrollment, compared to the number of students housed in portable buildings. You have to understand when you get into this, what they need to be told, what they want to listen to. Then what we did is we said, we've talked about various pieces of information. And we're going to have one more slide that talks about thresholds in just a minute. But we said, okay, now we'd like to ask you the same question again. If an election were held today, how strongly would you support or oppose a bond election in the range of $307 million? Again, construction, technology, security, safety, and a contribution for a potential indoor aquatic facility. Overall, we went from 61% support in the pre-test up to 69%. So the information that we gave the public, the voting public, caused them to be more positive than they were originally. So we know we're on the right track with the voters in terms of what we were telling them. In Alexander, we went from 51 to 59%. In LBJ, from 79 to 85%. United South saw the least amount of growth from 69% to 73%. Parents of UISD students saw support increase by 8%. Parents of graduates by 3%. Non-parents went up more than even parents by 1 percentage point. The one part that was interesting is that campus-based and non-campus-based employees did not see any change. So what that tells us is in the course of the survey, the information that we provided to staff was either already known, so it did not have a degree to influence them. So what we have to do, or what the district has to do, or the committee has to do, is find additional information or additional methods to use to increase that degree of support. But we noted that our voters were more supportive after giving all the information that we had given them. Conclusions about the survey. 3 times as many voters are satisfied with the quality of education than dissatisfied. Employees in general are more than 8.5 times more positive. 85% were satisfied, just 10% were dissatisfied. 50% of the voters currently have children in a UISD school. The bond package threshold that we tested was in the $300 to $350 million range. Now, what is a threshold? What we did is we asked voters, how likely or unlikely would you be to vote in a bond election at a certain dollar range? And we started at under $250 million. And what we were looking for was the point when a majority of the voters said, no, that's too much money. Not without giving them any information, without saying, well, we're going to build schools and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. At what point are you unlikely to vote for a bond election? And when we reached the $300 to $350 million threshold, people who didn't have any information said, that's enough. Now, you as a committee will look over all those sorts of things and then make decisions. But the voters, when we talked to them, they said $350 million is, we're not comfortable with anything higher than that range. The threshold was the same for parents and non-parents. Obviously, if you supported a bond election, you were more likely to support a higher amount. If you opposed a bond election, you did not support that amount. We looked at a threshold, a monthly threshold, in the range of $13 to $16 before people said that's as high as we feel we should go. When we're talking about overcrowding, they felt that new schools and additions was the preferred choice. The second choice was year-round schooling as a solution to overcrowding. And you'll see that it wasn't close in terms of preferences. Pre-test support versus opposition was 61 to 28%, with 11% undecided and 13% undecided among employees. Both sets were more strongly supportive than strongly opposed. And that's good, because if you have your opposition or your intense opposition a more prevalent opinion, you're starting in the rears right off the bat, because those people who are most passionate about a bond election in this case, they're both more positive than they are negative. Another good sign. From a thematic standpoint, both groups supported enhanced computer technology, safety and security, roofs and air conditioning, and then new schools and additions at ratios of very high percentages. The post-test showed more support from voters than employees for the indoor swimming facility. Talked a little bit about it, but we didn't want to spend a lot of time in this presentation on that. Voters were influenced most by information about computer technology, projected enrollment figures, not so the 2003 debt or the cost of portable buildings. One of the statements that we said was the district has spent a significant amount of money on portable buildings since the bond election was defeated, and that did not have as much of an influence on them. Voters were swayed by technology statements and district-wide improvements. The information provided a positive impact on voters, again, not on employees. That's a very brief presentation, and hopefully it was slow enough for the translator to help all those people. And should there be any questions afterwards, I'd be more than happy to answer you later. Thank you very much.
Again, the full detailed report is in your binder. It was over 30-something slides, so we didn't want to keep you here all night. We gave you but it's very fascinating information. As a matter of fact, we have over 3,000 pages of more detailed information specific to age groups, sex, all kinds of different categories that we can look into to be able to dissect the specific areas. But at the end of the day, it's over 69, almost 70% supportive of that, and we're going to continue that momentum. With that, it's the last item on, or the last presentation item on our agenda. We have the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Finance, Ms. Laila Benavides.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be real brief. There's a lot of slides, but it really is straight to the point, and that's what you'll get from me. I'm a CPA, and that's what you get from CPA. Just real quickly, why do school districts hold bond elections? And what is a bond election? Well, first of all, the bond election is an opportunity for our voters, for our district voters, to consider the issuance of debt in order to provide funds for the construction of schools and facilities. There are certain types of debt that at the school district we're allowed to borrow without voter approval, but we do get board consent. However, for this type of election, or this type of debt, and for the amount of debt, you do need voter approval. And then the other thing is that you can only use the loan proceeds for the construction of schools and facilities and to equip and to make like a turnkey project of these buildings. School districts, like pointed out before, can only hold bond elections the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November or the first Saturday in May. So as a school district, we only have 2 opportunities during the school year or a year to hold a bond election. And then there's certain kinds of deadlines that you have to meet, and Mr. Cruz alluded to one of them, that you have to call for the election so many days before the election is actually held. So that's why we are on a certain timeline. A successful bond election gives the district the authorization to issue this debt that's referred to as bonds for a not to exceed amount. So when you see a proposition on the ballot, it'll say for a certain amount, that we will not exceed that amount. That's the amount that the voters have authorized for us to borrow. And that the levy to pay that bond back, or those loans back, the voters are giving the district the authority to levy that tax rate to pay back this debt. And then just a little information on, and I'm not going to make everybody an accountant today, but I think everybody does pay taxes. The total tax rate for a district is divided into 2 tax rates. There's the operations tax rate, which right now for our district is $1.04. And this tax rate, or this taxes that we collect from this tax rate, we can use it for operations, for teacher salaries, for supplies, utilities, fuel, books, just everything you see in those little pictures, the lights, the insurance. I mean, I can go on and on and on. But really for debt service, that's a separate tax rate that's been authorized by a successful bond election, can be used only to pay back principal and interest on the loans that we made, or the bonds that we sold. And the proceeds from the loan can only be used to pay for capital expenditures. So again, the buildings, the turnkey, getting them furnished, the land, the sewer lines, the sidewalks, the roads, I could go on again. But everything that it takes to make that building ready to open its doors, we could fund from bond proceeds. So then there's 2 separate tax rates. The $1.04, let me just point out that in the state of Texas, school districts are not allowed to go higher than $1.04 unless they get voter approval, not through a bond election, but through what they call a tax rate election. And at this point, our district has yet to even consider such an election to hold. And then the debt service, again, it depends on how much your loan payment is. Here's just a little bit of history of our tax rate, and it goes back, we picked the 10-year period that we're talking about here because the last successful bond election we had was in 2003. It was November 2003. And I believe it was for $142 million. It was for $142 million. But I think the building we're sitting in right now was funded by those bonds. And so without having successful past bond elections, we would not be in this building right now. But anyway, if you look at the total tax rate back in 2003, it was $1.48, and then it went up slightly. It peaked at 2005 at $1.61. And again, this is the total tax rate, the debt service and the operations together. came back down, and then it has been pretty steady since 2007 at $1.18, and where we are today at $1.19. Here's your operations tax rate. Remember I told you that in the state of Texas, a school district cannot go higher than $1.04 without a tax rate election. You'll see in the earlier part of the decade, in 2003 through 2006, the state of Texas would allow a school district to go as high as $1.50. However, here in UISD, our board never elected or just never saw passing that type of tax rate onto the property tax owners. The highest we went was $1.38, came down to $1.26, and then in 2007, there was property tax relief given by the state of Texas that required us to reduce our tax rate by 92% of the tax rate it was back then. So just a little bit of history on our tax rate then. Here's our debt service tax rate. Our debt service tax rate is that rate that we can assess to collect taxes to pay back the loans, to pay back these bonds that we have issued. Back in 2003, when we had our successful bond election for $142 million, we were at 15 cents. And then you see it peak at 2005. That is when we started paying back the $142 million. And then as we were going through the years, remember, property values go up, and also there is another caveat to this. There's what they call state assistance, that throughout this past decade, we have been helped by the state of Texas in paying back this debt. But since 2007 on, we have been at a steady 15 cents. And next year's projected tax rate is going to stay the same. Here's a little history on our taxable valuation. Just like Mr. Garza pointed out, our district lines go out to the web county lines. And so a lot of our district is made up of farmlands, of acreage, agricultural, and it's also made up of a lot of the minerals, oils, and gas that you see, especially going on in the activity in the northwest part of our county. Now, if you can see the history of our valuation there, you'll see that it did steady off between 2008 and 2009. We started losing value in some of our homes. There was foreclosures, but at the same time, there was a balance with the activity in the oil and gas coming, which you could see hit really hard in 2011 and in 2012. So what's kind of helped United ISD, even though we haven't raised our tax rate, yes, the valuations on these properties have helped us kind of keep our head above water. Just a little bit of facts about our property values. The past 3 years, our values have grown by over 22%. In the oil and gas values, they've grown over 178% in the past 3 years. Now, the only thing about oil, gas, and mineral values is that those wells deplete very fast. And if you have wells depleting very fast, they're not going to be sustained over a 10, 20-year period. However, because of the activity we've heard going on in the Eagle Ford Shale, there is plenty of activity, plenty of wells being added onto the roll, but we always have to keep that in mind, that when we're projecting out to the future to pay back 25-year debt, that we may not have this type of value 25 years out. So we always have to be real careful in calculating our tax rates. Residential properties, 38%. We've seen that kind of be steady, but at the same time, where's the growth? The growth is in United ISD. Those homes are added onto our roll every year. And just another little side mark here on residential values. United ISD offers a local optional homestead exemption to all our residences. This means that you get your value, and we do not tax 15% of that value. Not too many school districts in the state of Texas offer that local optional homestead exemption, but United ISD since the early 90s has always offered that local optional homestead exemption. So it's additional property tax relief for our own homeowners. So our current taxable valuation is over $12.6 billion. Here's a pie chart of just what our appraisal roll looks like. Residential makes up 38%, oil and gas 22%, commercial 30%, and then acreage and others, 5.6 and 3.5. Again, just keeping an eye on our role, what is going to stay. It's real important for us to kind of always keep an eye on what our taxable values are going to be. In managing our debts, yes, we've had, I believe, 3-4 successful bond elections. And so right now in our audited financial statements, we show that we owe over $260 million. We've managed the debt. You saw the tax rate. We've been able to keep it at 15 cents because of our values going up and also because we've gotten assistance from the state. We managed our tax rate to stay at 15 cents. We reduced the overall cost of borrowing by taking advantage of historical low interest rates. I don't know how many of y'all have refinanced your homes in the last 3 or 4 years. Let me tell you, here at United ISD, we're given an opportunity to refinance our own debt. So for the past 10 years, we've refinanced the debt that we've issued. We refinanced over $102.5 million of our debt. That means we've had savings to the taxpayers of over $8.8 million. That means $8.8 million that we won't have to pay in the future or even right now. The average old interest rate on that debt was 4.93, almost 5%, and we brought the new rate or the new debt down to less than 4% or less than 3.5% at 3.3%. So we have taken advantage of these low low borrowing rates that are out there. I did talk about state assistance. In the state of Texas, back in the late 90s, they went ahead and passed 2 programs. One was called Existing Debt Allotment, and the second one was called Instructional Facilities Allotment. And both of these allotments that came from the state of Texas were to help school districts build schools. They weren't going to give you the money to directly, like they weren't going to borrow on your behalf. You still had to go to your voters, have a bond election, have your board approve having the bond election, and issue your debt. You did have to go into debt. But what the state said is, based on your wealth per student, we'll help you with so much money. And so we have been fortunate to be part of both of these programs. And over the past 13 years, we've received over $112 million in assistance from the state. And what that's done for us is that 40% of our debt that we've paid back, we've actually picked up the tab on 60% of it. So that's helped our taxpayer. That's helped that tax rate stay where it's at. Or it could have gone even higher had not this assistance kicked in. We feel that the way the state is continuing to do the EDA or the existing debt allotment, and we feel because of our wealth per student, remember our values are growing really fast, that we might qualify that maybe 20% of our future debt might be picked up by the state, but we still have to do all the calculations on that. This is just information again to show how much of the debt had been picked up by the state. You see it varies based on your values, your student count, and so on average, like I said in the slide before, it's picked up about 40.5% of our debt. But you'll see in the past, 13 years or so, it's been different types of assistance that we've gotten from the state. In 2012, they helped us with 29% of our debt payment. And then what does that mean as far as taxes? It means that in the year 2012, the state picked up 6 cents. Like we would have had to go to the voters, the taxpayers and say, to make our debt payment next year, we need 6 cents more. So that 15-cent tax rate really would have been like 21 cents instead of 15 cents. And so that's all that this information here is just showing you, that we've tried here at United to take advantage of state assistance to try to keep the taxpayers' levy or tax liability low by offering the local homestead exemption, and also taking advantage of value growth and make sure that that value growth is sustainable before we project any future tax rates that we need to pay back any debt. I believe that's my last slide.
Thank you, Lila. And Lila really was really very brief. I think as we go to the next couple of meetings, I know Lila will be more specific on the different tax rate and how, the taxpayers at United, how they're taxed based on the value. And the other item that's important, I know our values are going up, especially the oil and gas. But what happens at the state level, if our local values go up, state reduces state aid. So it's not like every year we're able to get additional funds. I think Lila will share that information to you at the next couple of meetings. Let me just share a couple of things before we pass to Commissioner Morales. Just to remind you, the binders, obviously, they're yours, you take them home, you can look at that, bring it back for the next meeting. If you look at the last tab that you have, your calendar, if you just go over the last, at least to make you aware when the next meeting is going to be. Here you have all, 5 meetings and where they're going to be held at. The next meeting will be next Tuesday, June the 18th, here at this facility. You have an agenda, what it is that we're going to cover. We'll get more into detail in that area. I know today I wanted to be really brief, just give you an overview. Then the following meeting will be Wednesday, June the 26th. There we're going to meet at United Middle. United Middle is there on Delmar Boulevard. And the reason, they have an auditorium, and again, that's our oldest building, 50 years old. But the reason we're going to meet there is we have different areas to be able to set up and break down into several committees, those 5 committees. Now, also next week, we're also going to give you a handout for you to select what's your first, second, or third choice for those committees. And we'll try to get your first choice in those particular committees. Then after June the 26th, that first week of July, we'll have a meeting. We'll come back on July 10th again. They're at United Middle, small groups again. Then the following week, on Tuesday, July 16th, we'll come back together and hopefully make a recommendation for the small group to the large group and hopefully get a consensus of what it is that we can afford and what it is that we can support. And bring that to the steering committee and eventually to the board and hopefully call a bond election. And that's where we're going to need your help and support. But today, we just want to be brief. We want to make it short, but at least to give you an idea what it is that we're looking at, then we'll get into the next couple of meetings more specific into details. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Morales in closing. Name tags, if you want to take them, really fine. We'll leave them here, put them together. We can have them for you here for the next meeting. And just remind you, again, next meeting we'll have a light snack or lunch. This way you guys can come and you don't have to go home, come back here and get some food. Okay? Thank you all very much. Richard?
Mr. Santos and Ms. Benavides, Mr. Turco. As you can tell, there's been a tremendous amount of work put into this project to get this information in a way that can be presented to all of you. So that brings us to the next agenda item, number 4, and I'm sure there are people that have questions. We got a lot of information thrown at us. So what I'll do is I'll allow committee members who have questions or comments to come up to the podium. What we will ask is that the comment be limited to 3 minutes per side, as we talked earlier. And any one issue that's going to be discussed will limit that to 10 minutes. So I will open the floor. Is there someone who would like to step up to the podium to give us any questions or any comments? Go ahead, sir.
We're doing the survey, and you ask somebody, do you think $250 million is too much? And they say, yes, it is too much. So you ask them, why do you think it's too much?
Mr. Turco, that's a good question.
I would have asked that.
We did not ask them why they felt that $350 million was too much. We went to the next level. What we were looking at was initially, because a lot of people are going into a voting booth at some point and casting their ballot, not knowing a lot of information. What our initial intent was to say, okay, prior to us giving you information, what is your comfort level in terms of dollars? And every voter has different comfort levels. We didn't want to go in and say, well, why is your comfort level as low as it is? What our intention is to find out from the entire populace where that comfort level is. That comfort level does not necessarily mean that a committee is going to look at it and say, okay, we don't need to go any higher. You as a committee is going to be given the task of saying what needs to be done. I have worked with committees who have said what the administration feels is the correct amount is too low. And a committee will say, we believe there's more of a need and we will work to get a larger amount passed. And it has happened. In Arlington, Texas, which is where I live, the committee came and said, we need more schools built. And they went forward with a larger bond amount than was requested, and the voters did approve it. That's not to say it always happens, but oftentimes it does. Our intention again was to present in a survey prior to giving them any information where their comfort level was. I hope that answers your question.
Part of it, that's good.
Well, then that's part.
Any other questions? I'm sure there are a few.
You might ask a little note of it.
That's right, and there's going to be other opportunities. This is not the only opportunity to ask questions we'll have in their meetings. We'll also have an opportunity to present questions via email and in writing today. The staff will be here after the meeting as well to answer any questions privately for those who need to get home to their kids or whatever.
Mr. Turco, another question for you. I joke sometimes that I say that whenever there's a 10-second snippet that's an uninformed or wrong information to get it out there, it takes 2 weeks to try to combat that. The comments you gave the people, there was an 8-point increase because you gave information. What happens when, I don't know if you can answer this, but when the information is wrong or it's not necessarily true, what kind of skew does that give? Because what's our challenge? Because there's a lot of people out there that are uninformed, and that one snippet of uninformed information that goes out there, how does that change? I don't know if I'm asking the correct question.
It's difficult to denote how a negative comment or incorrect information or a negative comment put out by generally opponents attempting to negatively influence a bond, how you can battle that. One of the questions we asked was the amount of the package was too high. I will oppose it because it's too high. I will oppose it because of various information that we could just at least initially test. And we found out that there are people who believe that 307 is too much. And there are some people who say they want to oppose it because they don't want their taxes increasing. But it's a minority viewpoint, it's not a majority viewpoint. What will be done in the course of an advocacy campaign is to try to address information put out by either opponents or people who have a vendetta against whatever is saying, trying to mislead people. You have to kind of address that information during the advocacy campaign, not necessarily before any information is given out relative to a potential bond election. Does that partially answer?
Let me just add real quick. In your packet, there are some questions that were asked that were negative in nature, I guess is the best way to put it. But it was a clear minority in terms of what people, for example, knowing that your taxes would increase. You would figure that would be a majority in terms of people disapproving of that. It was a clear minority. So if you look at your packet information, it actually gives you some detailed points. The other part to it, when you look at the overall picture of the negativity, there's going to be people that are going to vote against it regardless of the circumstance. But then we actually surveyed those individuals that were negative towards the bond election, and it got further broken down specifically why they were negative. And it's in your packet as well.
I just have a comment regarding I think it's important that we do some needs the school district first and attach the amounts later in the process. We've talked about that amongst the staff and amongst the board, but all this information is being presented so that people understand the backdrop in which we're looking at this thing. But we need to make sure that we do completely address the needs of the school district in the eyes of this committee. And then just like anybody does, if you have a project at home.
Just pick up through the. I think you lost your mic, Jim.
Okay, maybe I can make it a little closer. But just like a project that you might do for yourself privately, the first thing you do is you shape up the project and try to figure out what your needs are, and then you start putting dollars to it. What we don't want to do is jump ahead and start circumventing this process and say, well, we're limited to that amount. Now, on the other side of the coin, once you guys look at it closely, it could even be a lesser number. So it's background for this committee, but we need to not be worried too much about being married to it, at least early on. We can come back to that at the end of the process. Comment.
Do we have any other questions, comments, concerns? I have a question. I can ask a question. And I'm going to relate a question that someone asked me during the break, and that, it's going to be something directed to you, but anyone else can answer. The question was, why a bond election as opposed to other types of debt that you can take? Why a bond election?
Well, first of all, other type of debt, we would have to pay back the operations tax rate, which we are held to $1 for. And you all saw the little pictures of what we can use operations money for. Can we use operations money to pay back debt? Yes, we do. However, that other type of debt that's not voter approved, it has limitations. It has limitations on amounts, on how far you can go, how many years you can pay it back. And so it really puts a burden on the taxpayer because if you start using your operations money, you're going to have to go into your budget and start really cutting areas that you're trying to support with the limited tax rate, that we can't go any higher than the $1 for. And so I hope that answers the question. I can start gathering information. What is the limitation on the different types of debt that we have? We do have other debt. We borrow to pay for buses. We borrow to pay for some of those 300 and some portable classroom buildings you've seen there. We have borrowed for, we have computer leases, copier leases, and we also have borrowed to equip our schools, our furniture and equipment as well. So yes, we're limited in the type of financing we can do with the schools.
Thank you. Sure, go ahead.
Welcome to the chair for the record. I have a couple of questions. One of them primarily would be, what would be the guarantee if the bond was passed in the fairness in the bidding process for the construction companies? Because I know that it's limited in Laredo. In any other department, for instance, in any department, I think you can outsource it. It's the majority of the outsourcing is out of our district. But in the construction process, how many companies would we have in the bidding process to ensure that we stay within budget?
One of the departments that I actually oversee is the purchasing department, so we're specifically involved with the procurement process. As probably many of us know, when you're dealing with municipalities or political subdivisions like school districts, we are adhered to the state requirements by procurement law. So basically, we have to go out for a competitive type of situation. Under construction, we have many forms. We have either competitive proposals, bids, design build, construction manager at risk. We have to adhere to those specific avenues in order for it to be a valid and a process that the state requires. Of course, our own board policy is even more restrictive than what the state requires, which the board can do so. The realities have been that in the last several bond elections, they have been within the amounts that the voters have approved. And so whatever we promised to construct, we've done. And so I guess to answer your question is whatever the committee comes up with, whatever the board finally approves, and whatever the voter actually votes on, we cannot build more than that, and we certainly have to build up to that.
Well, that's a key question. Before you leave, Mr. Asa, the reason why I asked the question is because I know in the past we've had other companies, such as in San Antonio, where they have actually submitted in bids for respectable companies for different projects in the city that have been well under those same numbers that same companies provided here in Laredo. What would be the difference in giving them, and I know in the past it's been, well, let's keep the jobs in Laredo. They still keep the jobs in Laredo because they hire local guys. So what would be the difference in bringing in outside companies to do the same job with the lower rate?
Yes, whenever we solicit, obviously, it's an open process and anybody can submit. It doesn't matter where you're from, where you're at. There are certain state requirements that require a reciprocal effect. For example, you have a contractor out of Wyoming, for example. Whatever that state of Wyoming dictates in terms of competitive bidders that go into that state, there may be even, in some cases, a 5% penalty if you're an outsider coming into that state. That's how they protect their local interests. We reciprocate that in terms of any outside circumstance. But normally, you're going to have contractors within the state that are interested in bidding. It's going to be competitive. It's always been competitive. And to be quite frank with you, one of our schools that we actually constructed that was a low bidder school was LBJ High School. And after several litigation issues afterwards and so forth and so on, we had to recoup almost 1/3 of the amount of the construction to be able to finish that school off because of the faulty construction of the issues that we had. So we have worked it out. It hasn't worked out necessarily in the past when you have a low bidder situation, but we certainly look at and protect the best interest of the school district.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Any other questions? Yes.
I want to talk about something that Orlando's comment about. How do you diffuse, did I get it right, Orlando? How do you diffuse incorrect or deliberately malicious or comments? You know, we've been doing some meetings. We've had meetings before this one, and I served on that original Blue Ribbon a few years back. And I don't know if you, I hope you'll realize how important this group is. And I hope you realize too that we're really going to, it's really going to be 2 steps. What we're going to do for the next 2 or 3 meetings, we're going to divide into committees, and the input that you all are going to be providing is going to be really critical. But that input is going to help us decide as a committee how much and what exactly we're going to propose to recommend to the board. But the second step to me is, I think, just as important, and that's going to be the advocacy. One of the recommendations we've made is that advocates should come from you, from us, that it not be something that we only leave the responsibility to district staff, that you, parents and citizens and teachers and all of us be involved in the advocacy. And then as you're going through the process of the committee work, the data that they're providing is absolutely awesome. When you think about the fact that 96% of the building permits in Laredo, 96 of them are within the United District, and that they've only tapped 5% of district area, which will tell you that, my Lord, what can you expect in the next 5, 6, and so on and so on. So I think it's going to be very important for Orlando that we be ready not only to study this carefully, but also to be ready to be advocates, because I think that's something that maybe we didn't do the first time around, but we're the ones that are going to need to inform the community that this is something that really needs to happen. Just my thought. Okay?
Thank you for those comments. Mr. Garcia, I think we're out of time. Just kidding, go ahead.
Sylvia did steal my thunder a little bit. I served on that original bond committee with her, and my question is directly in correlation to her statement. I can pretty much guarantee the reason why the bond did not pass in '03 was the failure to get the information out to the voters. At that point in time, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a program that was instituted by the state that was going to match, or at least maybe pay for half of the amount of money that was being requested, which means that the number that was being requested for the bond wasn't actually the real number. And that information never made it to the voter. And that package had great things planned. Administrative buildings, an auditorium, high schools, elementaries. It would have basically taken care of everything we're asking for today. My question is, how is it that we're going to change from '03 to today, in getting the information out, besides maybe newspaper articles or very nice presentations, because everybody here is armed with the information that's necessary for the voters. But how is it that that UISD is planning on getting this information out to the people that need to be reached, that are actually going to go to the polls, that are going to be lazy, and pass this bond? We all agree, I think, that there needs to be change, we need some help. But how is it, besides us telling our neighbor in word of mouth, what is UISD prepared to do in order to get that information out to the voter?
You're right. I think last time it was a lack of information given to the public. Let me tell you what we're doing now, and I think Ms. Bruni was correct. We're going to be getting you guys involved with us as we start going to different organizations and different campuses. We didn't do that last time. As we speak, staff is looking at, as an example, at all the civic clubs. When do they meet? We're looking at, we've talked to all our campus principals. When is the PTA meeting? We've also met with Mr. Villarreal at the voting place. We're going to be able to get, I think, 5 mobile units to go to different places. We're also talking to the AD. You know, I think we should be able to have all these other items, get you guys involved, going to the public, going to the schools, be able to help us sell what it is that we're trying to sell. And really what we're selling is facilities for our students. We didn't do that last time. I think, you know, obviously social media now is very different than what it was then. We're going to get involved in that. I know our communication people are working those things. But I think to me, it's the involvement of this particular group going to our campuses, going to different civic clubs to do presentations and in different places. That, I think, is really what's going to be able to help us win this election. We got to run like an election. I know I talked to Patty the other day. And we've got to run this. It is an election. It is an actual election. We just can't sit back and hope people go out there and vote. We've got to go out there, got to sell what it is that we're trying to sell, facilities for our students. Is there going to be a tax increase? Yes, it is. And let's not kid ourselves. But you know, this building that we're here today, some of you probably decided that it was what United needed, and they passed a bond election to build this facility, to build all the facilities that we have. Probably our parents, did we want to pay an extra tax? No, we didn't want that. But that's our commitment. You know, our generation that's coming is really the generation that's going to lead this community, this nation. So the involvement of you committee members with us going to the different places is going to be the difference. We didn't do that last time. I think that's got to be key. And I think our job is to prepare you as best as we can to be there with us. The other item is our campus principals are going to be getting involved with us too. They're the ones, when we go to the campus, that's who the parents feel very comfortable with. That's what we're going to do. We're also going to do a little video, a little different than that. Probably maybe 8 minutes, 5 minutes, English and Spanish, depending, you know, whatever it is. And then we can answer any questions. But I think video will point a lot of information, a lot of stuff that people can see. We've got already, as we speak, 2 different people, one from KGNS, Patty Kirby will do the English version, Marisa Limon will do the Spanish version. People in the community, you know, recognizes. So I think the key is the involvement of this particular group with us. And I know today was brief, but I think as we start getting into more detail, I think you're going to be able to see the things that need to get done, and hopefully we'll get you to go with us and support. Some people don't feel comfortable, but there's a lot of people in this group that do feel comfortable going with us. I mean, especially parents that are here and staff members that are here at the campuses. Different town hall meetings. You know, we've got to do it differently. And then again, it goes back, you know, we've got to look at the voter list. That's reality. Who voted, what precinct, who knows what. Identify the dates, early voting. where they're going to be at when we have a large group of people here. I mean, we're also looking, the band, fine arts, will have a function at the auditorium that we have there. Football games, you've got, when our larger schools play, I mean, you've got 6,000, 7,000 people here. We'll have early voting also, mobile voting. So these are things that we need to get involved. I think some of our political, I know Mr. Bennett here, some of our elected officials have committed to help us. I know Mr. Cuella has committed to help us. There's a lot of people out there that realize what we've got to do for our kids. But we've got to do it different. We've got to run an election. But I think we've got to get you involved with us. We can't sit back and say, here it is, we'll get support. The other item we just failed to share with you, anybody over 65 and over, their taxes don't increase. They will increase if they do some additional improvements to the house. And we've got to relay that to could be our parents, some of us that are at that age. It is important. It is important that we bring them out. I think when you look at the number of voters that are there, it's key. And you just can't take it for granted. You can't say, I know it's going to pass because it's always passed. No, it didn't. And to be honest, I think we learned a lesson. We brought those people back to tell us why it didn't pass. But I think going back to the question that you asked, I think that was it. It's a lack of us. And again, I'll take the blame for that. Getting people involved and going out there with us to be able to sell things that our students need, our children need. And we need your support. But I think that's going to be different. We're starting to work on that as we speak.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Any other questions?
I've got one more comment.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. We've discussed that issue greatly, and the question about what we're going to do differently. I wasn't on the school board at the time, but one thing that I know, looking at the history of this, I came in as a school board member realizing it was an uphill battle to get one of these bonds passed, and I didn't really realize how important it would be until I've been on the board for a while. And as we found out more about what had not happened the previous time, as far as the bond not passing, the impact started to unfold. They unfold over years. So as the years have gone by, we've steadily seen those impacts getting in, and the community doesn't really see them quite as clearly as they will say in a few years. If we do not pass this bond this time, it will become very evident to the community that we have big problems at UISD. I would not have known that if I wasn't a school board member, so it just is something I wanted to share with you. The next thing is, for me as a board member, I have to go to 15 hours of continuing education every year. And I have always picked the classes that pertain to bonds. One of the things that I came across in one of those classes is a big emphasis on teachers. The most trusted person in our education system for most people, because we got to realize most people are much more disconnected from it than we are now. Me as a board member and also the staff members. So we realize there's this disconnect there. We see a lot of things that people don't see. You would logically think they see the same things as you do, but they don't have the same seat there to see it from. So there's a different perspective we're trying to take into consideration. And what I would say is that of utmost importance is that we emphasize, we set this committee up. We wanted every school to turn in a teacher that we thought showed a lot of leadership on that campus, and also a parent. Now, we ended up with more than 2 persons from each campus in some cases. But just as a show of hands, how many teachers and coaches do we have with us today? Okay. That is what I would submit to you will be a big difference. The other teachers on your campuses, coaches, and the parents you all deal with are going to be most greatly impacted by what you guys think about this. I think Mr. Turco may have included it. I've seen a couple of his presentations already. Did you cover that issue about the teachers in your statistics today? There was a question asked in the survey that asked for people to rank the sources of information that they would use to evaluate their support for a bond. And we listed off media, radio, various sources. Teachers were one of the sources that were listed. That was the highest ranked source. So we go into this thing hoping that, as usual, that the teachers and coaches at UISD will make a big difference. So that, I believe, is the biggest part of the answer to that question.
Thank you, Judge.
questions? All right. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our first meeting of the Citizens Bond Committee. I want to thank all of you that came today. I'd like to thank all the presenters as well, Mr. Santos and the staff. Right now, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting from the... Do I have a second? All in favor?